Have you ever wondered why the US dollar is the king of all currencies? It's not just because America has a big economy. The real reason is hidden in a deal struck decades ago, a secret pact that tied the world's most important resource, oil, to the American dollar. This system, known as the petrodollar, didn't just make the US wealthy. It built the most powerful economic empire the world has ever seen. But this empire was built on a fragile foundation, and today, cracks are starting to appear. What happens when the one thing holding the global economy together starts to break? To understand how we got here, we have to go back to 1971. The world was in chaos. President Richard Nixon had just done the unthinkable. He severed the US dollar's final link to gold. For decades, the Bretton Woods Agreement had pegged global currencies to the dollar, which was, in turn, convertible to gold at a fixed rate. This system provided stability, but the costs of the Vietnam War and growing domestic spending forced the US to print more money than it had gold to back. The gold standard was a chain, and Nixon broke it. Suddenly, the US dollar was floating, backed by nothing but the full faith and credit of the United States. Global confidence plummeted. Countries started dumping their dollars, fearing they would become worthless paper. The American economic empire was on the verge of collapse. The US needed a new anchor, something just as valuable as gold, to force the world to need its currency. And they found it in the vast, black oil fields of the Middle East. This is where the story takes a fascinating turn. The US government, led by Henry Kissinger, saw an opportunity in a crisis. In 1973, the OPEC oil embargo sent shockwaves through the global economy. Oil prices quadrupled, and nations scrambled for energy. The US approached the most powerful player in OPEC, Saudi Arabia. They struck a deal that would reshape the world. The terms were simple, yet ingenious. The US would offer military protection and weapons to the Saudi royal family, guaranteeing their security in a volatile region. In exchange, Saudi Arabia would do two things. First, they would only sell their oil in US dollars. Second, they would invest their excess oil profits back into US government debt. This was the birth of the petrodollar system. The effect was immediate and profound, because Saudi Arabia was the world's largest oil exporter and the leader of OPEC. Other oil-producing nations quickly followed suit. Suddenly, any country that wanted to buy oil, which was every country first, had to buy US dollars. This created a massive, permanent, and artificial global demand for American currency. The dollar wasn't backed by gold anymore. It was backed by oil, the lifeblood of the modern industrial world. The US could now print money with far fewer consequences, because there was always a global market hungry for its currency to buy energy. The US had successfully transformed a currency crisis into an incredible source of power. It could now fund its government deficits, military spending, and consumer economy simply by creating more dollars, which the rest of the world was forced to absorb. For decades, the petrodollar system seemed unbreakable. It was a golden age for the US economy. The constant demand for dollars kept US interest rates low, making it cheap for the government, corporations, and citizens to borrow money. This fueled incredible economic growth and a rising standard of living. For the rest of the world, it was a different story. They were trapped. They had to hold massive amounts of dollars in their foreign reserves, which were constantly at risk of losing value as the US printed more money, a hidden tax on the entire world. But the system had a darker side. Countries that tried to challenge it faced dire consequences. Think about Saddam Hussein in Iraq. In 2000, he announced he would start selling Iraq's oil for euros instead of dollars. A few years later, the US invaded, or Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, who proposed a gold-backed African dinar to sell oil and other resources. Soon after, he was overthrown. Coincidence? Maybe, but the pattern is hard to ignore. The petrodollar wasn't just an economic agreement. It was enforced by the full might of the US military. But no empire lasts forever. and the petrodollar system is now facing its greatest challenge. The very foundation of the deal, the partnership with Saudi Arabia, is eroding. In recent years, Saudi Arabia has begun to pivot. It's strengthening ties with America's biggest rivals, China and Russia. The kingdom has openly discussed the possibility of accepting other currencies for its oil, including the Chinese yuan. In 2022, Chinese President Xi Jinping visited Riyadh and proposed a new paradigm. Oil and gas trade settled in yuan. This isn't just talk. The Shanghai International Energy Exchange now has a crude oil futures contract priced in yuan, directly challenging the dollar's dominance. Other countries like Russia, Iran, and Venezuela, all under US sanctions, are actively seeking ways to de-dollarize their trade. This isn't a single rebellion. It's a coordinated shift. The world is slowly, but surely, building an alternative to the dollar-centric system. So, why did these attempts to fix the world's reliance on the dollar fail for so long? For decades, there was simply no viable alternative. The euro was a contender, but the eurozone debt crisis revealed its structural weaknesses. The Japanese yen was tied to a stagnating economy. The US dollar, despite its flaws, had the advantage of being the currency of the world's largest and most dynamic economy, with the deepest and most liquid financial markets. Any country trying to switch away from the dollar faced immense risk. Where would they invest their massive reserves? No other market was big enough to absorb them. The system was designed to be a trap. But the rise of China has changed the equation. China is now the world's largest importer of oil, giving it immense leverage. And as it builds its own financial infrastructure, the yuan is slowly becoming a credible, if still distant, alternative. The old fixes, or rather, the lack of them, do enter play, and a world where America is no longer the only superpower in town. Now, let's connect this to what's happening today. You might be wondering, how does this ancient deal affect me? The answer is, in every way. The artificially strong dollar makes imported goods cheaper for Americans, from the phone in your pocket to the clothes you wear. It's a huge part of the American lifestyle. But it also makes US exports more expensive, hurting American manufacturers and farmers. The slow unwinding of the petrodollar system is also a major reason for the growing tension between the US and nations like China and Russia. They see de-dollarization as a way to escape American economic control and sanctions. When you see headlines about trade wars, or new alliances like BRICS exploring a common currency, you are witnessing the next chapter in the petrodollar saga. The decline of this system could mean higher inflation in the US, higher interest rates, and a significant drop in the American standard of living as the global subsidy we've enjoyed for 50 years disappears. We are living through the consequences of a deal made in secret half a century ago. So, what can we take away from all this? First, global power is never permanent. The petrodollar system shows how a single, clever move can create an empire, but also how that empire can become fragile when its foundations shift. Second, always follow the money and the energy. The link between oil, money, and military power is the invisible engine driving much of modern geopolitics. Understanding this connection is key to understanding the world. And third, the future is multipolar. The era of a single, dominant currency is likely coming to an end. This will create instability, but also opportunities for a more balanced global financial system. The big question for all of us is, what will replace it? And can the United States navigate this transition peacefully? Or will the decline of its economic empire lead to conflict? The future of the global economy hangs in the balance. Thanks for watching. If this story made you see the world a little differently, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think the end of the petrodollar means for the future?